Promised land. One day we will stand, rejoice in victory. We fall down to look up, waiting to see heaven's door.
First of all, congratulations on the success of the show. It seemed like it was kind of creeping under the radar towards the beginning, but the momentum has been building over the past several weeks. What has that been like for you guys?
Overwhelming, beautiful. I think we call it the little engine that could. You know, we believed in it. We knew, you know, we are on a small network, unknown network, and to be able now to get into people's homes and people to really take a hold of it. Hello. Is an amazing thing. I think we're all very, very blessed, very excited to see where it goes next for season 2.
One of the things that I've said is special about the show is it eliminates the broad strokes and tells the stories of real people in these circumstances. You understand why some people did certain things that most people may not know about. Kind of talk about being able to tell that part of the story.
I mean, that's the best part about the show. We all understand what the big elephant in the room is. We know what that is. But this is not a show about pointing the finger, I don't think. It's a show about understanding people's mentalities and, just like you said, understanding why they do what they do, which really kind of invites us as an audience into who they are as people, as opposed to seeing them as things, you know, as opposed to seeing, you know, I think slave is an improper term. These people were enslaved because when you say enslaved, you add accountability to someone having done something to somebody. So you say slave, that's like you are a piece of machinery, you're a tool, you're here. Enslaved, we understand that you're human, you have a soul, you have beliefs and wants and needs and ambitions. And then you have all facets of what that means to them. Some who believe in their own freedom, some who don't feel worthy enough. You have white abolitionists who are culturally enslaved because they live in a society that doesn't agree with their beliefs, and if they fight for their beliefs, they are then vilified. And then you have people who believe in enslavement, and they feel like that is justifiable because it is their nature. Yep. It's the culture. They feel like, why change? Why this? You know, the system works. Why break it? You know, so it gets us to understand how people satisfy their own mistakes. And I feel like it teaches us how to not repeat those mistakes ever again.
But I think at the same time, too, there's this fascinating thing where we're seeing people do by any means necessary, you know, for freedom. I think it also shows that in spite of the odds, there was still joy, there was still love, there was still faith, there was hope. They wanted to leave a future for their children. They wanted to have goals. They wanted to own their own homes. They wanted to have families. All these things. We get into the side of every one of these characters and find out their secrets and their fears and their doubts and all those things. It's not just the archetypes of being a hero and a villain. It's about being able to turn them upside down and say, we're all villains, we're all heroes. We all have this inside of us. And depending on your circumstance, what are you capable and willing to do for freedom when everything is against you? And I think where they ride, Joe and Misha write in such a fine way that we all ride, every character rides this beautiful line where you can't really point to someone or something. We're saying this is what this is, and now how do we fix it? And are we going to repeat it?
That's a good question.
We're not going to repeat it.
I've been curious because obviously the show's very popular among African Americans. Have you had feedback from white viewers?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Actually, a guy from Montana actually sat with us.
We were having breakfast,
and he was like, "I'm a huge fan. I watch it in Montana." You know, and that also speaks volumes right there. It's Montana.
I think the show has enormous potential, assuming that the momentum continues to build, to be transformative for America, because it creates water cooler talk about this thing that nobody wants to talk about.
Right.
Amirah, your turn.
My pleasure. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing that's the most satisfying is the conversations that come out of people watching it. You know, I mean, on a purely entertaining entertainment aspect, it's a thrill ride for us because it is a thrill ride. There are ups and downs, and every episode has a surprise in it, and every character has a surprise. But then at the end of the day, you go home and then you're sitting like with your coworkers at the cooler or with the young people that we met today at the high school here in Memphis, and just to be able to say, wow, this is your legacy, this is the history, whatever you're going through right now, you can overcome. It's not the first time this happened to them, they overcame, and just the idea to be able to build people up and build up not only young people but then us too, and us as a nation. And right now we're in the middle of a lot of upheaval too, and there's slavery still around the world if we take it internationally. So I just feel like the magnitude and the ripple effects of conversations, and hopefully change, that people can realize that change happens with them. The abolitionists were having these conversations just on rail cars. Journey's character at the end, let's see, decisions are constantly made between all the characters in the simplest ways. So it's like we all participate in revolution in some way, or we can.
It seems like in watching the show, you can see some of the societal issues we deal with and say to yourself, that's where that started.
Yeah.
And there's a direct line between what happened in 1857
Right.
to where we are now. Can you talk about what some of those moments were?
Oh man, I'll put it like this: it changes your behavior, because once you know the root of something, once you know the foundation, and you kind of get that education, you then have an intelligent opinion, more so internally, for how you choose to execute your decisions. Something as simple as a phrase. People go around saying, "Hey, what's up, young buck? How you doing, young buck?"
Right.
Not knowing that back in the 1800s, young buck, literally young buck, meant young black man in his 20s, meant to be sold up on the block. He was very prized, very valuable. He was strong. Called him a young buck. So now today, if someone was to call you a young buck, it changes how you accept that, and it changes how you think about it going forward. And that's just a very small tip of the iceberg. We get into the
Value.
light skin, dark skin issue with that is still very present within black culture, which makes no sense, because at the end of the day, we all black. But we understand where it was and where it came from, because it was institutionalized within us.
Yeah, all these divisive tactics. Like my character deals with that, being a house slave, and then Adina Porter, who brilliantly plays Pearlie Mae. And I just love that we dealt with that, because one of the things that out of discussions that came was it's always that the house enslaved person was considered in a better position. But you have to realize, if you were in the house and you were considered more beautiful, you were probably raped at some point. And that's how you got that fair skin. So if you just think about the origin of actually all it was divisive. And that's why even when I do that horrendous act, for those who haven't watched, but you do it, and there are a lot of people were in support, which I appreciate, because Miss Ernestine does make so many sacrifices for her children. At the same token, lest we forget, let us not ever be under the circumstance where there's no other choice but to kill our sister. That has to be unacceptable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we can't forget that in the telling of the story. And so once you start looking at that, you say, oh yeah, this is so foolish. All it was always divisive tactics. And so we can kind of get a refresher of just like, yeah, we really need to stay unified, because we have a lot of power, which is why we were a target, and why we still are.
I think one of the things that's relative is the fact that we talk about value, the value system. In finances and everything. With slaves, there was a value system as far as the current, the worth of the money wise. But we have the same issue going on today. We still are worried about how people value us, as opposed to how much we value ourselves. And so there is this disconnect that is still going on in our community, where we're worried about what the outside is thinking about, as opposed to what our own think about us, in our personal walk. And so I think there is that line where we've escaped off the plantation, and we are all running because we know that we have worth, we have purpose in this world, and it's about taking ownership. And I'm hoping that we continue to do that today. Hoping that is the thing that Black Lives Matter movement is saying, is that we're trying to say we have worth here. We spend the most in this country, and yet we have the least amount of power. And it is about us now saying, but we have worth, not just in your financial, but also just in our own communities and our education. We need to start backing each other, as opposed to, as we say, creating divisive tools to separate from each other.
Because to speak to your point, representing ourselves financially, aesthetically, or whatever, through other means to satisfy someone else's perspective, we lose touch with ourselves. And once you're lost, you're lost. You know, there's no way to get back to your culture. There's no way to get back to your own personal foundation and soundness and being able to be still within yourself and know who you are. And that's something that we even challenge with our characters in the show. I think every character has their own particular challenge. I'm not gonna give away no stories. Y'all still gotta see the finale, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I think really the question that we pose as a series is, where does your value lie? In humanity, where does your value lie with yourself? Where does your value lie with your fellow sister and brother, regardless of what they look like? And if you don't know the answer to that, you better find the answer.
And there's joy. I just have to say that.
yeah,
Sorry, I know we're gonna wrap, but it's
Joy.
also but when the story is told well, you don't lose the joy because our people always have joy. I think of my own mother and like growing up with anything that I went through, I always still had joy because my mother said, "I'm gonna make sure my child doesn't understand, all the struggles that I'm going through." And I think sometimes the story is told from a perspective that people aren't familiar with our story, and so it's just like, we've never been so downtrodden that we don't know how to laugh. You know what I mean?
Or dance.
It's just not or dance
Or sing.
or right. And so I think that's another part of it. It's like you can enjoy it too, enjoy the journey because we have a good time.
Because we always made something out of nothing.
That's
So
right.